Have you ever experienced that gut-wrenching feeling of being judged by others? Maybe it was for something you loved, something that made you feel unique, or maybe it was just an innocent expression of who you were. Now, imagine being a young girl, walking into your school, filled with hope and excitement, only to face the cruel sting of judgment from your peers. That's exactly what happened to one young girl, whose only crime was wearing a dress she spent hours creating herself. She had poured her heart and soul into that dress, hoping it would be a symbol of her creativity and hard work. Instead, it became the target of relentless bullying. You see, it's not just about the dress. It's about how something so personal and meaningful can be twisted and used against someone, turning a symbol of pride into a source of shame. But what happens when the tables are turned? What happens when the person who's supposed to enforce the rules, the principal, steps in with a surprise that no one saw coming? Stay tuned because in the next few moments, you'll uncover how this story unfolds in a way that no one could have predicted. Stick with me until the end, and I promise you'll be left in awe of the unexpected twist. You might be wondering, how could something as innocent as a handmade dress cause such chaos? It's just a piece of clothing, right? But here's the thing. What we wear, how we present ourselves, is so much more than fabric and thread. It's an expression of who we are, where we come from, and what we believe in. For this young girl, that dress was a symbol of her passion, her talent, and her individuality. She had worked for weeks on it, each stitch sewn with care, each design chosen with purpose. It was her creation, her vision brought to life, and when she walked into school that morning, she did so with a sense of pride, not knowing that others would see it as an opportunity to tear her down. The moment she entered the classroom, the whispers started. The giggles, the mocking stares, all aimed at her, all focused on the dress that was meant to make her feel special. But it didn't. It made her feel small, exposed, and vulnerable. Her peers didn't see the hours of effort and love that went into the dress. All they saw was something different, something that didn't fit their idea of what was normal. And in a world where fitting in is often the most important thing, standing out can be a dangerous thing. But the bullying didn't stop with just words. No, it escalated quickly. The whispers became laughter, and the laughter turned into cruel comments that cut deep into her soul. It was as if the entire school had turned into a theater, and she was the unwilling star of a show she never auditioned for. The more she tried to ignore them, the more they made sure she couldn't. The jokes, the taunts, the teasing, all aimed at her, all because of a dress. A handmade dress, to be exact. And this wasn't just some isolated incident. It happened every single day. Each day, the teasing grew bolder. The girl began to dread going to school. What once had been a place of learning, growth, and connection now felt like a battlefield. She had become the target, the victim of something she couldn't control. She felt humiliated, isolated, and desperate for it all to stop. What was supposed to be a celebration of her creativity had become a daily reminder of how cruel and unforgiving the world could be. But just when things couldn't seem to get worse, something changed. It wasn't the kids who had been bullying her, and it wasn't her teachers. It was the principal. Now, you're probably thinking, what could a principal possibly do to change the situation? You're going to want to keep watching because what happens next is something you'll never expect. The principal, a figure of authority, someone who should have been enforcing rules and maintaining order, decided to step into the picture. At first, it seemed like just another routine meeting. Maybe the principal would talk to the bullies, or perhaps she'd try to reassure the girl. But no, this was far from a routine situation. What the principal did in that moment would turn everything around, not just for the girl, but for everyone involved. So, what did the principal do? How did she manage to turn the tables in a way that no one saw coming? I'm about to reveal that to you, but first, I want you to take a moment to think about the power of kindness, the impact one person's actions can have. We often underestimate how much one moment, one decision, can change the course of a situation. In this case, the principal was about to make a move that would change not just the girl's day, but her life. And it wasn't just about stopping the bullying. It was about teaching everyone in that school, the bullies included, a lesson in empathy, respect, and the power of standing up for what's right. Stay with me, because in just a few moments, you're going to hear the twist that will leave you speechless. This isn't just a story about a bullied girl and a handmade dress. It's a story about growth, about courage, and about the ripple effects of a single act of kindness. As you're watching, I want you to think about your own experiences. Have you ever felt different? Have you ever been judged for something that made you feel unique? How did it affect you? I'm sure we've all been there in some way, shape, or form. But what if, in those moments, we had someone in our corner, someone who believed in us, who stepped in to help us see our worth? That's what this story is all about, and the best part is, the surprise that the principal had in store was just the beginning. Now, imagine the scene. The principal walks into the room, and suddenly, all eyes are on her. The students stop whispering, and the tension in the air is thick. The young girl is sitting at her desk, trying to hide behind her hands, feeling the weight of all the eyes on her. And that's when it happens. The principal takes a deep breath, looks at the class, and does something so unexpected, so powerful, that the entire room goes silent. What happens next will make you rethink everything you thought you knew about kindness and standing up for others. Trust me, you're going to want to see it unfold. Keep watching to find out how this story ends, because you're not just going to be amazed by the principal's actions, you're going to be inspired by them. So, stay with me, and let's dive deeper into what happens when one person dares to do what's right. The young girl, whose name was Emma, had always been a bit different. Growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, she had learned early on that standing out could be a double-edged sword. From a young age, Emma was passionate about art, particularly fashion design. While most girls her age were obsessing over the latest trends or brand-name clothes, Emma found joy in creating her own clothes from scratch. She didn't need the newest thing on the rack. She preferred to spend her weekends at home, sketching designs and sewing them together with her own two hands. But in a school where conformity was king, Emma's individualism didn't always go over well. There were whispers, snickers, and the occasional snide remark, but she had learned to ignore it, or so she thought. In the weeks leading up to that fateful day, when Emma wore her handmade dress to school, things had been feeling off. It wasn't just the usual teasing she'd grown accustomed to. There was a distinct shift in the air. It started with Sarah, a girl Emma had once considered a friend. Sarah, who had always been quiet, had suddenly become more vocal in her disdain for anything different. Emma had noticed the subtle jabs Sarah would make when they were paired up in class, commenting on her dress choices or the way she styled her hair. At first, Emma tried to brush it off, thinking Sarah was just going through a phase. But it was becoming clear that Sarah's teasing wasn't an accident. And Sarah wasn't alone. Emma began to notice other classmates joining in, laughing when she wore her more unique outfits, rolling their eyes whenever she spoke about her projects, or even openly mocking her in front of the entire class. It was the kind of behavior that made her question whether her creativity was something to be proud of, or if it was something she should hide away. One afternoon, just days before Emma decided to wear the dress, she overheard a conversation between Sarah and a few other girls in the hallway. They didn't know Emma was nearby. Why does she always have to be so different? Sarah's voice was sharp, filled with disdain. It's like she's trying to show off or something. Who does she think she is, making her own clothes and acting like she's some kind of designer? Emma's heart sank as she heard the words, but she couldn't bring herself to confront them. She just couldn't shake the feeling that Sarah, once her friend, was now a key player in what had become a growing sense of isolation. And though the others may not have been as direct in their teasing, it was clear that they were following Sarah's lead. But the bullying didn't stop with just the students. Emma's relationship with her teachers had begun to feel strained too. It wasn't as obvious as the cruelty she faced from her classmates, but there was a subtle tension, a sense that they were tired of hearing her talk about her passion for fashion. Mrs. Harris, Emma's home economics teacher, was the one who had encouraged her to take on the project of designing and sewing the dress in the first place. But even Mrs. Harris seemed distant recently, as if her once supportive attitude had shifted to a more dismissive one. Emma had even caught her rolling her eyes when Emma mentioned her excitement for her upcoming project presentation. It was as if no one in the school understood her, or worse, they were starting to resent her for being different. So, when Emma decided to wear the dress, she knew it wouldn't be easy. But she had convinced herself that it would be worth it. She wasn't going to hide who she was just to fit in with the crowd. She wasn't going to let their petty criticisms change her. It was her moment to shine, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. She had spent countless hours on the dress, pouring her creativity into every stitch, and the thought of showing it off to the world, or at least to her schoolmates, filled her with a sense of pride and determination. But as soon as she walked through the school doors that morning, she felt the weight of the judgment. The looks, the whispers, the laughter. And suddenly, all that courage she had built up seemed to fade away. It felt like everyone in the school was looking at her, waiting for her to slip, to make a mistake, to show them that she didn't belong. And then there was the principal, Mrs. Thompson, a woman who had always been known for her tough, no-nonsense attitude. No one had ever dared to question her authority. She had earned a reputation for maintaining order and discipline at the school. If you got in trouble, she was the one you had to face. But Mrs. Thompson had always been fair, or at least, that's what most of the students thought. It wasn't until Emma's situation started to get worse that whispers began to circulate about her role in the bullying. Some students claimed that Mrs. Thompson had made comments about Emma's dress behind her back, fueling the fire of the bullying. Others said that she had been turning a blind eye to the situation, as if the drama and teasing didn't concern her. Emma wasn't sure if that was true or not, but there was something in the air, something that made her feel like the one person who could have stood up for her was choosing not to. But she had no way of knowing if these rumors were true, or if they were just more fuel to the fire. Now, as the bullying reached its peak, Emma had reached a breaking point. She wanted to go home, to escape the pain, but she couldn't, not yet. Not without knowing that her voice had been heard, that she had at least tried to stand her ground. Little did she know, the very thing she feared the most was about to happen. The principal, Mrs. Thompson, had taken notice of the situation, and it wasn't because of the dress. No, it was because of something far more troubling. Something that had caught Mrs. Thompson's attention and made her realize that this wasn't just about a dress. It was about something far deeper. But what was it? What did Mrs. Thompson know that Emma didn't? The tension in the air grew thicker as Emma awaited the principal's arrival, her mind racing with every possibility. Was the principal going to punish her? Was she going to join the other students in mocking her? Or was she going to take a stand and do something that could change everything? Emma could feel her heart pounding in her chest, her hands clammy, but she wasn't about to back down now. Not after everything she had been through. She had to find out what Mrs. Thompson had in store. But she wasn't prepared for what came next. As the principal walked into the room, the weight of the silence seemed to press down on Emma. She was ready for anything, except what was about to happen. Mrs. Thompson paused, scanning the room as if she were searching for something, or perhaps someone. And then, without saying a word, she made her move. What she did next would send shockwaves through the entire school, and it would change everything Emma thought she knew about the people around her. But before we get there, let me ask you this. Who do you think was behind the bullying? Was it just the students, or was there something more to it? Stick around, because the next part of this story will leave you questioning everything. As the principal, Mrs. Thompson, stood there silently, staring at Emma with an unreadable expression, Emma felt her stomach twist in knots. Her heart pounded louder with each passing second. Was she about to be punished? Was her handmade dress about to be used against her, the symbol of her defiance, a target for ridicule from someone who should have supported her? She braced herself for the worst. But then, Mrs. Thompson broke the silence. "Emma, I need to speak with you after class," she said, her tone serious, but not unkind. There was something about the way she said it that made Emma's pulse spike. It was as though Mrs. Thompson wasn't just concerned about the dress, but about something deeper. As the bell rang, signaling the end of the school day, Emma's mind raced with possibilities. She could already feel the weight of everyone's eyes on her as she gathered her things. The students in the hallway seemed to part like a sea, whispering in hushed tones, their laughter barely concealed. Emma ignored them. She had more pressing matters on her mind. What did the principal know? Why had she asked to speak with Emma? When the final bell rang, signaling the end of the day, Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had been dreading this moment, knowing that her confrontation with Mrs. Thompson would determine everything. She headed straight to the principal's office, her footsteps echoing down the empty halls. As she reached the door, a strange chill ran down her spine. The office was eerily quiet, the low hum of the fluorescent lights the only sound. Mrs. Thompson was sitting at her desk, her posture rigid, as though waiting for Emma to enter. "Sit down, Emma," Mrs. Thompson said, her voice calm, but there was something unsettling in her tone. Emma obeyed, her palms sweating as she perched on the edge of the chair. She waited for Mrs. Thompson to speak, but the principal only stared at her, studying her face as though she were looking for something, or perhaps trying to decide what to say next. Emma's nerves were on edge. She had expected a reprimand, but there was something more in the air, something Emma couldn't quite put her finger on. After what felt like an eternity, Mrs. Thompson spoke, but her words weren't what Emma expected. "I need you to stop digging, Emma," she said, her voice low, almost like a warning. "You're getting too close to something you shouldn't. There are things about this school, things about your classmates, things about me that you don't know. You have no idea how deep this goes." The words hit Emma like a slap to the face. Stop digging? What was she talking about? Before Emma could respond, Mrs. Thompson added, "I've been trying to protect you, but if you keep pushing, you'll only make things worse. For you. For your family." Emma's mind whirled with confusion. Protect her from what? And what did her family have to do with any of this? Was the principal trying to scare her into backing off? Or was there something more sinister going on? Emma didn't know. But one thing was clear, something wasn't right. Mrs. Thompson's cryptic warning only made her more determined to find the truth, no matter the cost. As Emma stood up to leave the office, still reeling from the principal's words, she noticed something strange. There, on the corner of Mrs. Thompson's desk, was a folder, one that didn't seem to belong there. It wasn't a file she recognized, but it looked official. It was a thick folder, with papers spilling out of it, and it had a name written on it in bold letters. Emma Harris. Emma's breath caught in her throat. Why would there be a file with her name on it in the principal's office? And why did it look so important? Her curiosity got the better of her, and before she knew what she was doing, Emma took a step closer to the desk, her eyes glued to the folder. But as she reached out to grab it, the door to the office suddenly swung open, and there stood Mrs. Thompson, her eyes wide with alarm. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice sharp and filled with authority. Emma froze, her heart racing. Had she been caught? Did the principal know she was about to uncover something she shouldn't? I wasn't doing anything," Emma stammered, trying to play it cool, but the adrenaline pumping through her veins betrayed her. Mrs. Thompson's gaze lingered on her for a moment, and then, with a sigh, she walked over to the desk, picking up the folder as though nothing had happened. "This is a matter for another time," she said coldly, her tone now completely different from the way it had been just moments ago. "You'll leave the office now, Emma. And you won't mention this again." Emma couldn't believe what she was hearing. The principal had just dismissed her, acting as though nothing out of the ordinary had happened. But Emma was no fool. There was something in Mrs. Thompson's eyes, something that wasn't adding up. She had been hiding something. Something about Emma. Something about the dress. Something about the students. As Emma left the office, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Everywhere she went, she felt eyes on her, tracking her every move. She tried to push the thought out of her mind, but it lingered. The tension in the air was palpable. It wasn't just the students anymore. It was like the entire school was holding its breath, waiting for her to make a mistake. But just as Emma thought she might be able to catch her breath, something unexpected happened. The next morning, when she arrived at school, she found that her dress, the very one she had worked so hard to create, had mysteriously disappeared.
Gone.
No one knew where it went. No one had seen it. It was as though it had vanished into thin air. Emma searched everywhere, but the dress was nowhere to be found. It was almost as if someone had intentionally hidden it, trying to make her feel small, insignificant, and invisible. But who would do that?
And why?
Was it Sarah trying to take her down? Was it Mrs. Thompson covering up something bigger? Or was there someone else, a hidden ally, working in the shadows to stop Emma from uncovering the truth? The mystery deepened, and the more Emma searched for answers, the more dangerous it became. She knew she was getting closer to something, but the closer she got, the more she felt like she was being pulled deeper into a web of deception and betrayal. There were whispers in the halls, eyes watching her from every corner, and a growing sense of paranoia that made Emma feel like she couldn't trust anyone, not even those who claimed to be on her side. And then, just when she thought things couldn't get any worse, a mysterious note appeared on her desk. The message was simple but chilling. "Stop looking into this, or it'll cost you more than just a dress." Who was behind this? What were they trying to hide? And why did they want Emma to stop digging? Stick around, because the next chapter will reveal something so shocking you won't believe your eyes. As the days passed, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something much larger was at play. The note had shaken her to her core, but she couldn't let it stop her. The more she thought about the strange disappearance of her dress, the more she wondered if it was connected to something else, something more sinister. She wasn't the only one feeling the heat. Her best friend, Lily, had been by her side through all of this, offering support when the whispers became too much to bear. But now Lily was acting strange. She wasn't her usual bubbly self, and her eyes seemed distant, as though she were hiding something. It wasn't long before Emma discovered the reason why. One afternoon, after class, Lily pulled her aside in the hallway, her voice barely above a whisper. "Emma, I got a note too," she said, her face pale, her hands trembling. Emma felt her heart drop. "A note? What kind of note?" she asked, already dreading the answer. Lily's eyes flickered nervously, and she glanced over her shoulder, as if making sure no one was listening. "It was similar to yours," Lily confessed, her voice cracking. "It told me to stay out of it, to stop talking to you, to stop digging into the dress." Emma's stomach churned as she processed the words. This wasn't just about her anymore. Someone was going after Lily too. And whoever was behind this, they were escalating things fast. Lily explained that the note had been slipped into her locker that morning, hidden inside a book she had left behind in the library. At first, she thought it was just a prank, but after reading it, the fear had set in. It was clear that whoever was behind this knew more than they should. They knew Lily had been talking to Emma, that she was connected to the investigation. But why her? What did Lily have to do with the mystery surrounding the dress? Was she just collateral damage, or was there something more to it? The more Emma thought about it, the more questions piled up. She and Lily weren't the only ones involved in the case. There were others. Mrs. Thompson had her secrets, and Sarah, the girl who'd started the bullying in the first place, was connected to something bigger than just a school rivalry. But as the pieces began to fall into place, Emma found herself questioning everyone around her. No one seemed to be entirely trustworthy, and the deeper she dug, the more tangled the web became. Later that evening, as Emma was scrolling through her phone, trying to make sense of everything, something caught her eye, a local news story about a mysterious break-in at the school. The report mentioned that several files had been taken, including some concerning student records. The article barely skimmed the surface, but Emma could sense the connection. Was this the same school that had seen a sudden spike in strange incidents over the past few months? Was the break-in tied to the mysterious events surrounding her dress? The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as the pieces of the puzzle started to shift, but they weren't fitting together just yet. Just as Emma was about to investigate further, her phone buzzed with an incoming message. It was from an unknown number. Emma's hands shook as she opened the message. "Keep digging, and you'll find more than you bargained for. You won't like what you uncover. This isn't just about you. Don't say I didn't warn you." The ominous tone sent a cold chill down her spine. Who was sending her these messages? And why were they so determined to stop her from uncovering the truth? The next day, Emma received an unexpected visit. It was from her older brother, James, who had been working late shifts at a nearby restaurant. She hadn't seen him much recently, given his hectic schedule, but there was something different about him when he showed up at the door. His usual confident demeanor was replaced with a subtle unease, and when he spoke, his voice was lower than usual, as though he was trying to mask something. "Emma, I need to talk to you," he said, his eyes flickering nervously. "There's something you need to know about that dress. About the school." Emma was stunned. James had never shown any interest in her school life before. Why now? Why was he suddenly so concerned? "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice betraying her confusion. "I'm not sure how to explain this," but he hesitated, glancing around as though he was worried someone might be listening. "You're not the only one with a secret, Emma. There's something about that dress, about your connection to it, that's been buried for a long time. It goes deeper than you think, and it's tied to something that happened when I was your age." His words hung in the air like a weight pressing down on Emma's chest. What did James mean by that? What could he possibly know that could change everything she thought she understood? Before Emma could press for more information, James's phone rang, cutting the conversation short. He looked at the caller ID, and his face went pale. Without another word, he quickly excused himself, his demeanor now completely changed. Something was off. Was it connected to the mystery? Was James involved in some way she hadn't yet realized? The door slammed behind him, and Emma was left standing there, trying to make sense of the cryptic words he had said. Emma's thoughts were interrupted when Lily texted her, her message short but urgent. "I need to show you something. Meet me after school, by the old locker room." Emma's heart raced. What was Lily going to show her? Was this the breakthrough she had been waiting for, or was it another dead end? She didn't have time to waste. Whatever was going on, she knew it was bigger than a missing dress, and it was bigger than schoolyard bullying. She grabbed her things and headed straight for the old locker room, her mind racing with every step. When she arrived, Lily was already there, her eyes wide with fear. "You're not going to believe this," Lily whispered, her voice shaking. She held up a small, torn piece of paper, one that looked eerily familiar. It was a copy of the note that Emma had received just days ago. But this time, there was a new message, one that sent a jolt of panic through Emma's veins. "It's not just the dress that's at stake. It's everything you know. Don't trust anyone, not even your family." The stakes were higher now, and every twist and turn in this unraveling mystery seemed to raise the danger to a whole new level. Emma wasn't sure who to trust anymore, or who was watching her every move, but one thing was certain. She couldn't stop now. Not with so many people involved. Not with so much to lose. The deeper she went, the darker it became. And the more she uncovered, the more she realized just how high the price would be. But would she ever find the answers? Or would she be silenced before the truth could ever come to light? The following days felt like a blur to Emma. Every step she took, every corner she turned, seemed to bring her closer to the edge of something far darker than she had ever anticipated. The once comfortable world she had known was now suffocating, each interaction and glance from those around her carrying a weight she couldn't shake off. The notes, the warnings, and now Lily's increasingly nervous behavior, it all added up to one conclusion. Emma was in serious danger. But she couldn't stop now. She had to know the truth. It was late one evening, after a long day of school and an equally exhausting investigation into the strange events surrounding the dress, when Emma noticed the first unsettling sign. As she made her way home through the empty streets, a car behind her seemed to follow at a consistent distance. At first, she chalked it up to coincidence. It wasn't unusual to see other drivers out at this hour, but as she turned onto her street, the car followed. She quickened her pace, trying to shake the creeping feeling that something was wrong. But no matter how fast she walked, the car kept pace. A chill crept up her spine, and she felt her breath catch in her throat. She couldn't stop herself from looking back. The car's headlights shone brightly against the night, but she couldn't make out who was inside. The windows were tinted too dark. She reached for her phone, considering calling Lily, but something told her it was too late. The car slowed as she approached her house, pulling up just behind her. She didn't turn to face it. Instead, she hurried inside, locking the door behind her and peering cautiously out the window. The car stayed parked for a moment longer, then slowly drove away, leaving Emma with the gnawing sense that she was being watched. That night, as she lay in bed, Her mind raced with possibilities. Could it be someone connected to the school? Was it a coincidence that she had received those ominous notes and then been followed? Or was there something more sinister at play, something much bigger than her investigation into a simple bullying incident? Emma couldn't sleep. The unsettling thought gnawed at her, keeping her awake until the first light of dawn. She had never felt so exposed, so vulnerable. The next morning, things took an even darker turn. Emma arrived at school early, hoping to meet up with Lily and compare notes. But when she arrived at their usual spot by the lockers, Lily was nowhere to be found. Her absence seemed odd, considering they'd planned to meet. Emma's heart skipped a beat as she checked her phone. No texts. No messages. She tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. Anxiety crawled under her skin, and she felt the urge to search for her friend, to find out what had happened. But before she could go further, the principal, Mrs. Carrington, approached her in the hallway with a solemn expression. "Emma, I need to speak with you." "It's about Lily," she said, her voice low and controlled, but the edge of concern was unmistakable. Emma's stomach churned. "What about Lily?" she asked, fear clawing at her chest. Mrs. Carrington hesitated before responding, her eyes flicking over her shoulder as though she was looking for someone. "Lily didn't come to school today. She hasn't been answering her phone. And we found her locker empty. I'm afraid something might have happened." Emma felt her knees go weak as the blood drained from her face. Lily's disappearance wasn't a coincidence. It was connected to everything she had uncovered, and suddenly, the stakes had never been higher. She had no idea who or what was behind all of this, but one thing was clear. Someone didn't want her to dig any deeper. The hours that followed felt like a blur. Emma tried everything she could think of to reach Lily. She called her parents, searched the school, and even contacted the local police. But with every passing minute, the fear that something terrible had happened began to take root. She couldn't ignore the dark feeling that there was a hand guiding this whole situation, one that wanted to erase any trace of what had been uncovered. That afternoon, as Emma walked home alone, the paranoia she had been fighting off for days began to settle in. She wasn't sure if she was being overly cautious or if the danger was more real than she could have ever imagined. Every rustling of leaves, every car that passed seemed to carry a deeper meaning. Was she being followed again? Was it the same car from the night before? She dared not look back. The feeling of eyes on her was too strong, too suffocating. It was as if the whole world had become a web, and she was stuck in the middle, unable to escape. Then, as she reached her front door, a package was waiting for her. It was small, wrapped in brown paper, with no return address. Her hands shook as she picked it up, glancing around before quickly stepping inside. With trembling fingers, she ripped the paper open, revealing a single item, a photo. Emma's breath caught in her throat as she recognized it instantly. It was a picture of Lily. But Lily wasn't alone. She was standing next to a person Emma didn't recognize, a figure whose face was obscured by shadows, their features hidden. The person had their arm wrapped protectively around Lily, but it was clear that this wasn't a friendly moment. There was something in their body language, something in the way they held her, that made Emma's stomach turn. Written on the back of the photo were 2 words, "Stop now." Emma's heart raced as she felt the walls close in around her. Who had sent this? How did they know about Lily? And why was she being dragged into this mess? She stood frozen in the doorway, the photo in her hands, unable to make sense of the chaos unfolding around her. The more she tried to put the pieces together, the more the puzzle seemed to fall apart. Someone had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks, and Emma was getting closer to uncovering something that had been buried for far too long. But at what cost? The truth was slipping further out of reach with every passing moment, and now, the danger was no longer just theoretical. It was real. It was breathing down her neck. Emma's every instinct told her she was being watched, but she couldn't afford to back down. She couldn't let the mystery consume her without answers. Yet, with every new clue, every new threat, Emma found herself growing more afraid, unsure of who to trust, and more certain than ever that there was no going back. What had started as a simple schoolyard mystery had now become something far darker, and she had no idea who would be left standing when it was all over. Just when Emma thought she was closing in on the truth, the entire narrative shifted in a way she couldn't have anticipated. It all started when she decided to confront Mrs. Carrington, the principal, who had been so involved in the strange disappearance of Lily. There was something about her demeanor, the way she had approached Emma earlier, that didn't sit right. Emma's instincts told her that the woman was hiding something more than just a missing student. And so, against her better judgment, Emma decided to visit the school late that afternoon, hoping to find the answers she had been searching for. She walked through the dimly lit halls, each step echoing louder than the last, as if the school itself was holding its breath, waiting for her to uncover something it had long kept secret. The door to the principal's office was cracked open, and through the gap, Emma could see Mrs. Carrington, sitting at her desk, speaking to someone on the phone in a hushed tone. Emma hesitated, but then something caught her eye. On the desk, there was a folder, slightly open, revealing a photograph. It was too far for Emma to make out clearly, but it looked like it could be an image of Lily. Her curiosity got the best of her, and before she could second-guess herself, she slipped into the office unnoticed, the door creaking quietly behind her. The photograph was unmistakable. It was the same photo that had been sent to her earlier, the one with Lily standing next to a shadowed figure. Emma's heart raced as she looked at it again, this time with more focus. But there was something different. As she leaned closer, she saw that there was more to the photo than she had originally thought. Hidden in the corner of the picture, almost as if it had been intentionally overlooked, was a reflection in a nearby window. And there, standing just behind the shadowed figure, was someone Emma had never expected to see in this context, her own mother. Her breath caught in her throat. Emma's mind went into overdrive, trying to piece together how her mother could be involved in any of this. She had always been supportive, her biggest ally through all of Emma's challenges at school, always there when Emma needed someone to lean on. But this photograph, this new clue, suggested something far more sinister. How could her mother possibly be connected to Lily's disappearance? Why was she standing next to someone so ominously shrouded in darkness? Before Emma could process the shock of the discovery, she heard Mrs. Carrington approaching the office door. Panicking, Emma quickly shoved the photograph back into the folder, but as she did, she accidentally knocked over a stack of papers. The noise was loud enough to alert Mrs. Carrington, who immediately stepped inside, her expression faltering when she saw Emma standing by the desk. "You shouldn't be here, Emma," Mrs. Carrington said in a cold voice that was so different from her earlier concern. "I think you've seen enough for tonight." The tone sent a chill down Emma's spine. She wasn't sure what was going on, but everything about this moment felt wrong. Mrs. Carrington wasn't just concerned for Lily. She wasn't worried about Emma's safety or the investigation. She was trying to stop her from uncovering something far more dangerous. Emma's pulse quickened, her thoughts racing as she tried to formulate an escape plan. But Mrs. Carrington's next words stopped her dead in her tracks. "Your mother had a role in all of this, didn't she?" Mrs. Carrington's voice was laced with an eerie calmness. "She's been pulling the strings from the very beginning." Emma's stomach dropped. Her mind couldn't comprehend what she was hearing. She thought Mrs. Carrington was about to say something incriminating, but not this. Her mother? Pulling the strings? What could she possibly have to do with any of this? Before Emma could respond, the principal continued, her voice now a whisper as she leaned in closer. "Lily's disappearance wasn't an accident, Emma. It was orchestrated, and your mother was involved in making sure the truth never came to light. You should have left this alone." Emma's hands trembled as she struggled to make sense of everything. It felt like the world around her was collapsing, the ground beneath her shifting as she tried to hold on to something familiar, something stable. But there was nothing left to hold on to. Everything she thought she knew had been shattered in an instant. Just as Emma was about to demand more answers, Mrs. Carrington's phone rang, and with a sharp glance, she motioned for Emma to leave. But before Emma could take another step, she heard the unmistakable voice of her own mother on the other end of a line. "It's done. The plan is in motion. Emma won't suspect a thing. She's already digging too deep. She'll never find out the truth now." The blood drained from Emma's face as she turned and fled from the office, her heart hammering in her chest. She had never felt more betrayed in her entire life. Everything, the clues, the threats, the disappearing friends, was part of something much bigger than she could have imagined. It wasn't just about a school bully or a missing girl. It was about her family. Her own mother had been playing a role in this nightmare, and she had no idea how deep the betrayal ran. The further Emma ran, the more questions she had. How far did her mother's involvement go?
Who was she working with?
And most importantly, what was the end game? Now, everything was in doubt. What had seemed like a simple case of bullying had spiraled into something that reached far beyond the school walls, beyond even Lily. Emma was caught in a game where the rules had been changed, and her mother, the one person she had trusted above all, was at the center of it all. Emma's world had been thrown into a state of complete chaos, and now, standing on the precipice of an impossible decision, she was paralyzed by uncertainty. The phone call from her mother was the catalyst, one that had torn apart the semblance of peace she had managed to maintain. She had always trusted her mother implicitly, believed that whatever darkness existed in her world would never touch the people she loved. But now, with each passing second, that illusion unraveled further, revealing a harsh reality she could never have prepared for. The truth wasn't just murky, it was venomous, and it was staring her in the face. The weight of the situation settled heavily on her shoulders as she walked through the quiet, almost eerily still house. Every room she passed felt different, like it no longer belonged to her. She stood in front of the door to her mother's office, her hand hovering over the handle as if it were a symbol of everything she had once known and now feared to confront. What if this was a mistake? What if confronting her mother would only drive her further into the shadows of secrecy? But the alternative, living in ignorance, remaining blind to whatever dangerous truth her mother was hiding, was no longer an option. The pieces were already scattered, and the only way to make sense of the puzzle was to confront the person she least wanted to face. With a deep breath, Emma pushed the door open, her heart racing in her chest as she stepped inside. Her mother was sitting at her desk, her expression calm, almost too calm, as if she had anticipated this moment. The room smelled of old books and something distinctly sterile, a contrast to the tension that crackled in the air between them. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. It was as though the space between mother and daughter had grown too vast, too filled with unanswered questions to be bridged by mere words. Finally, Emma found her voice, shaking but determined. "What's going on, Mom? What's all this about Lily, about the photo, about everything? Why didn't you tell me?" Her words were sharp, each one a stab of frustration and confusion, a raw mixture of hurt and fear. Her mother's eyes flickered, but there was no sign of guilt or hesitation. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, exhaling slowly, her face an unreadable mask. "Emma," she began softly, "you don't understand. There's so much more at play here than you realize. What I've done, what we've done, is for your own protection. I never wanted you to get involved in this, but now it's too late." Emma's chest tightened at the mention of we. There was something unsettling about the plural, about the idea that this wasn't just her mother's secret, but something much larger, something that involved others, perhaps even people she trusted. She couldn't keep the edge from her voice as she pressed on, her anger rising. Protection? Protection from what? From who? And why involve me in this if I'm supposed to be protected? Her mother's gaze hardened, and for the first time, Emma saw a flicker of something dark in her eyes, something unfamiliar, something dangerous. Because, Emma, the truth is a weapon. It can destroy everything you've ever known. You think you're looking for answers, but all you'll find is destruction. You want the truth?
Fine.
But you're not ready for what comes with it. Emma's head spun, her breath coming faster as her mother's words sank in. "What are you talking about? What do you mean I'm not ready? You can't just..." Her mother interrupted her, her voice cutting through Emma's protests. "You have to decide now. You can keep digging, keep trying to uncover things that were never meant to be uncovered, or you can leave it all behind and walk away. If you choose to go down this path, there will be no turning back. People will get hurt. people you care about. And I can't protect you from that. The weight of her mother's ultimatum hit Emma like a physical blow. She wasn't just being told to walk away, she was being given an impossible choice. Her safety or the truth. The lives of the people she loved, or the revelation of something that could shatter everything. The room felt like it was closing in on her, suffocating her. She didn't know what to do, where to turn. Every part of her screamed to turn away, to flee from the chaos and the pain. But then, another thought crept in, a dark, insistent thought. If she walked away now, would she ever be able to live with the knowledge that she let this secret, this betrayal, stay buried? Would she ever be able to forgive herself for choosing ignorance over justice? Her mother's face remained cold, her eyes locked onto Emma's as if she were silently daring her to make the wrong choice. But Emma couldn't think about what was right anymore. She only thought about what she could live with. She had already come too far. There was no turning back. The truth was more than just a choice. It was an obligation. "You don't get to make this decision for me, Mom," Emma finally whispered, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. "I'm going to find out what happened, no matter what." Her mother's eyes darkened, and for a moment, Emma saw something like regret flicker behind them, as if her mother understood the magnitude of what was about to unfold. "I warned you," she said softly, almost mournfully. "Now you've sealed your fate. Don't say I didn't try to protect you." Emma didn't respond. She turned and left the office, the weight of her decision settling on her like a heavy cloak. But as she walked out of the house and into the cool night air, a feeling of dread washed over her. She knew she couldn't stop now. She had to keep going, had to uncover the truth, no matter what the cost. But deep inside, a gnawing fear began to take root. What if the truth was worse than she could ever imagine? What if, in the end, the cost of knowing was more than she was willing to pay? As Emma drove through the dark, winding streets, her mind raced faster than her car could travel. The decision she had made to continue down this path of destruction was weighing heavily on her. The truth felt like an anchor around her neck, pulling her deeper into a sea of lies and betrayal. The walls of her world, the ones she had spent her whole life building, were crumbling before her eyes. She had no idea just how deep the conspiracy went, but she was about to find out, and it would change everything. She had barely parked her car when her phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. Her heart skipped a beat, and her breath caught in her throat. She hesitated, staring at the screen, unsure of whether to pick it up. Every instinct screamed that it was a trap, a setup, something designed to lead her further into danger. But curiosity gnawed at her, and against her better judgment, she answered. "Emma," a voice said, distorted, almost robotic. "You don't know who I am, but I know who you are. And you've been asking the wrong questions." The hair on the back of her neck stood up. Her hand trembled as she gripped the phone tighter. "What do you want from me?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady, though the fear in her chest was undeniable. "You've been poking around in places you shouldn't," the voice continued, colder now, more menacing. "It's not just your mother's secrets you've uncovered. This is much bigger than her. There are people, dangerous people, who will stop at nothing to keep this quiet. You think you can handle the truth? The real truth." The words echoed in her head, each one sharper than the last. "You've already lost." Before she could respond, the call abruptly ended, leaving her with nothing but the buzzing static in her ears. Emma's pulse raced as the weight of the words settled over her like a heavy, suffocating blanket. Whoever this was, they knew something. They knew exactly what she had discovered. The truth was more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. Her fingers were shaking as she placed the phone back in her pocket, but the feeling in her gut wouldn't let up. Something was terribly wrong. The weight of the conspiracy had just shifted, growing heavier, more complex, and now, it felt like the forces surrounding her were closing in. What had seemed like a small, personal secret involving her mother had exploded into something much more dangerous, something that reached far beyond her family's walls. Without wasting another second, Emma got out of the car and headed toward the house. She needed answers, needed to confront the people she trusted most. There was no turning back. Not anymore. Her footsteps were heavy against the gravel, each one filled with dread as she approached the front door. But as she reached for the handle, she froze. The door was ajar, the kind of slightly open door that made every muscle in her body tense with suspicion. She stepped inside cautiously, the hairs on her arms standing up as she took in the stillness of the house. It felt wrong, unnatural. Suddenly, she heard a faint noise from the kitchen, a soft creak of a floorboard. Without thinking, she followed the sound, her heart thudding in her chest. As she turned the corner into the kitchen, her breath hitched. There, standing in the shadows, was someone she never expected to see. Her best friend, Sarah, was standing by the counter, her back turned to Emma. She didn't move, didn't even acknowledge Emma's presence as she reached for something on the shelf, something that Emma couldn't quite see. It was the way Sarah stood that unsettled her, the posture, the stillness. It wasn't like her. And as Emma's eyes adjusted to the dim light, she saw the object in Sarah's hand.
A file.
A file marked with a symbol Emma had seen before, a symbol that was connected to the dark web of lies she had been trying to unravel. Sarah? Emma's voice broke through the silence, though it felt as if her words were weighted with the same dread that filled the room. What is that? What's going on? Sarah froze at the sound of Emma's voice, then slowly turned to face her. The look in her eyes was something Emma had never seen before.
Cold. Calculating.
And then the words came. You shouldn't have gotten involved, Emma. You should have just stayed out of this. The shock hit Emma like a punch to the gut. Sarah, the one person she had trusted more than anyone, had been lying to her all along. The betrayal was almost too much to process. She had never suspected Sarah of anything more than simple friendship, yet now it was clear that Sarah had been keeping secrets of her own, secrets that tied her directly to the conspiracy Emma had been trying to expose. What the hell are you talking about? Emma demanded, taking a step forward. You're involved in this? With them? Sarah didn't answer. Instead, she placed the file back on the counter and stepped toward Emma, her movements slow and deliberate. I never wanted to hurt you, Emma, Sarah said, her voice now low and almost sympathetic. But you're in too deep. You've uncovered things that aren't meant to be uncovered, and now you have to make a choice. Emma recoiled, unable to believe what she was hearing. A choice? She asked, her voice trembling with a mix of anger and confusion. What choice? You need to leave, Sarah said, her gaze unwavering. Stop looking for answers. Walk away from all of this before it's too late. It was then that Emma realized the truth. The betrayal was not just personal. It was part of something far larger, something even Sarah couldn't escape. Why are you doing this? Emma whispered, the words breaking through the flood of emotions. What's at stake for you? For a moment, Sarah's eyes flickered with uncertainty. You don't know what you're up against, Emma. You don't understand the forces you've stirred. People will get hurt. And if you don't stop now, you'll be next. The words were chilling. Emma felt the pressure of the situation intensify, but before she could speak, there was a sound at the door. A knock, soft but deliberate. It was the kind of knock that carried a heavy weight, an undeniable finality. Sarah's eyes widened in panic, and Emma felt her heart skip a beat. It was like everything around her was closing in. Her best friend had betrayed her, and now someone else was here, someone who might finally bring the truth crashing down on her. Emma turned slowly, her mind racing. Who's there? She called out, her voice barely a whisper. No answer. Only the sound of the door slowly creaking open, and then the unmistakable feeling that everything she thought she knew, was about to change forever. Emma stood frozen, her heart hammering in her chest as the door creaked open. The silence that followed felt suffocating, the air thick with tension, and for a split second, she wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. Sarah's betrayal had shaken her to the core, but she was here, standing on the edge of something so much bigger than herself, something that had been unraveling before her eyes from the very beginning. This was it, the moment that would change everything. The person standing in the doorway wasn't just anyone. This wasn't some random stranger or another pawn in the game. This was the man who had been pulling the strings behind the scenes, the one whose shadow had loomed over every piece of the puzzle she'd been trying to put together. Ethan. The person she had trusted above all others. The one who had been right there with her through it all, pretending to be her ally, her confidant, when in reality, he had been orchestrating the entire nightmare. His eyes locked with hers, and for a fleeting moment, Emma saw the flicker of recognition, a moment of hesitation, almost as if he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to go through with this. But the cold determination that followed in his gaze told her everything she needed to know. This wasn't some petty, personal vendetta. This was something calculated. Something deliberate. Something that had been in the works long before she even realized it. "Emma," Ethan said, his voice calm, eerily so. "You're too late." "Too late for what?" She spat, trying to steady her breath, her hands trembling with the force of the emotion rushing through her. She was standing at the crossroads now. Either she confronted this head-on, or she let herself be swallowed by the chaos that had been consuming her life. "You should have never gotten involved in this," Ethan continued, stepping into the room, his presence now suffocating. "All of this, it's been a game. A strategy. And you were just a piece on the board." The words struck like a physical blow, leaving Emma reeling. She had trusted Ethan more than anyone, shared everything with him, her fears, her doubts, her darkest moments, and now he was telling her it had all been part of a game. She could feel the sting of betrayal, sharper than any wound she had ever endured, and yet, amidst the heartbreak, something else stirred within her. The realization that the truth she had been chasing was right here in front of her. This man, standing before her, had been the one pulling all the strings. "What game, Ethan?" she asked, her voice rising with desperation. "What have you been hiding from me? What do you want?" Ethan didn't answer at first. Instead, he took another step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. Then, slowly, almost too slowly, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, folded envelope. He held it up between them, letting her see the familiar emblem she had seen before, the same symbol that had haunted her thoughts, the same one connected to the mysterious file Sarah had been holding. Emma's stomach twisted in horror as she understood the gravity of what she was about to learn. This was it. This was the final piece. "You don't get it, do you?" Ethan continued, his voice steady but cold. "You were never supposed to find out. You were never meant to see this." He tossed the envelope onto the kitchen counter, the soft sound of paper against wood echoing in the otherwise silent room. Emma's hands were shaking as she reached for the envelope, her pulse pounding in her ears. She tore it open, desperate to finally understand everything. Inside, there was only one piece of paper, a single photograph. At first, it didn't make sense. It was a picture of her mother, but it was old, faded, taken years before Emma was even born. Her mother stood beside someone she didn't recognize, a man with a cold, calculating smile. But what made Emma's breath catch in her throat was the date stamped on the back of the photo, the same date as the day her mother had disappeared, the same day she had died. It didn't make sense. This couldn't be right. She had always been told her mother's death was an accident, a random tragedy. But this photo suggested something entirely different, something darker. Ethan stepped forward again, and Emma could feel the walls closing in around her. "Your mother wasn't just an innocent bystander," he said, his voice growing more intense. "She was involved in something bigger. Something far bigger than you could ever imagine. And now you're a part of it too." Emma's mind reeled, trying to process the magnitude of what she was hearing. Her mother had been hiding something dangerous, something connected to Ethan and the web of lies he had spun around her. But what was it? What was the truth that had been buried so deep? "You've been chasing shadows, Emma," Ethan continued, a twisted smile curling on his lips. "The truth you're looking for doesn't even matter anymore. You've already lost." Just as Emma opened her mouth to respond, a sharp sound shattered the tension. Footsteps. Heavy, fast, rushing down the hall toward the kitchen. Before she could even react, the door swung open, and in rushed Sarah, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic. "Emma," Get out of here, Sarah gasped, her voice filled with desperation. It's too late. You don't know what you've gotten yourself into. Emma stood, frozen, trying to process what was happening. She had thought Sarah was on her side, but now, everything felt like a lie. But as Sarah reached for her, trying to pull her away from Ethan, a loud crash rang out from the hallway, followed by the unmistakable sound of a door slamming open. Before Emma could even turn around, a figure emerged from the shadows. Someone she had never seen before, but someone who had a very familiar look of authority. Someone who was clearly not here to help. Enough, the new figure said, their voice low and commanding. It's time to end this. The words hit Emma like a jolt of electricity, and in that instant, everything changed. Ethan's cold smile faltered as he realized he wasn't in control anymore. The mystery, the conspiracy, it had been much deeper, much more dangerous than anyone could have predicted. The stakes had just gone higher, and Emma was caught in the middle of something that could destroy everything she had ever known. Her heart raced as she realized she was no longer just fighting for answers. She was fighting for her life. And the truth? It was far more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. The final twist of the story, the one that had been hiding in plain sight, had finally been revealed. But even now, with everything exposed, Emma couldn't help but wonder, was it already too late? The aftermath was nothing like Emma expected. The days that followed the explosive confrontation passed in a haze of government agents, sealed documents, and hushed conversations in sterile, windowless rooms. She gave statement after statement, her voice cracking as she recounted every detail, trying to separate what she had believed from what had truly happened. The man who stormed into the room, the one who silenced Ethan and took control, turned out to be from an unnamed federal agency, one that didn't officially exist but clearly wielded power. They knew about the network, about the legacy her mother had been a part of, about the experiments and surveillance operations buried so deep in black-budget programs they were never meant to surface. What shocked Emma most was that none of them seemed particularly surprised. It was as if her journey, her trauma, her desperate search for truth, had been part of a contingency plan all along, one they had let play out to expose the last few loose ends. Ethan was gone. Not just arrested, vanished. No trial, no mugshot, no closure. One of the agents simply told her, "He's being handled," and walked away like it meant nothing. Sarah disappeared too, though Emma suspected that was by choice. She left a note, just a few lines scribbled on the back of a diner receipt. "I never meant to hurt you. Some debts are too deep to repay." Emma read it over and over, trying to reconcile the woman she'd trusted with the one who had lied. The photograph of her mother, now locked away in an evidence archive, was the key that had cracked everything open. Her mother hadn't died in an accident. She'd gone underground, trying to expose the very system Ethan had upheld. She'd been silenced, betrayed by those closest to her, just as Emma had been. The realization sat heavy in Emma's chest, but there was peace in finally knowing the truth, even if it came at a cost. The story hit the media like a flash fire, though not in its raw form. The truth was diluted, filtered, reshaped into a palatable narrative, an isolated corruption case, a rogue tech developer gone too far, government overreach swiftly corrected. But Emma knew better. She saw through the spin, through the carefully released headlines, the trending hashtags, and the viral TikTok breakdowns that didn't even scratch the surface. She stayed quiet mostly, not because she was afraid, but because she had learned the value of silence in a world where noise often served as camouflage. She kept the real truth close, guarding it like a wound that had started to heal but never quite closed. In the weeks that followed, Emma moved back to the house she had once called home. The room still smelled like old memories and dust, and some nights the creaks in the floorboards made her heart race. But something about the stillness brought clarity. She started going through her mother's old journals, now with new eyes. There were pieces that clicked into place, phrases and sketches and symbols that once seemed like nonsense but now spoke volumes. Her mother had known this might happen someday. In her own quiet, cryptic way, she had left Emma a roadmap, not just of how to uncover the truth, but of how to survive it. And though Emma would never get the chance to hear her voice again, she finally understood who her mother truly was. Not a victim, not a mystery, but a warrior who fought in shadows. Life didn't return to normal. It never could. Emma saw things differently now. She paid closer attention to the world around her. The flickers of surveillance cameras that lingered too long, the way certain people always seemed to be in the same place at the same time, the coded language buried in everyday conversation. There were moments when she caught herself looking over her shoulder, convinced that someone was watching. But there were also moments of unexpected calm. Moments when she realized that, for all the darkness she had waded through, she had emerged on the other side not broken, but awakened. One rainy evening, as she stood beneath the rusted awning of a bus stop, Emma received a message from a number with no caller ID. It was a single sentence. You did what she couldn't. There was no signature, no follow-up. Just silence. She stared at the screen, the weight of those words sinking deep into her bones. Whether it was meant as praise, a warning, or a threat, she couldn't be sure. But it didn't matter. Because Emma had finally found something she'd been missing all along. Not just the truth, but herself. And yet, as she slipped the phone into her pocket and looked out at the hazy blur of headlights and wet pavement, she couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't truly over. The conspiracy had many layers, many players, and the deeper she had gone, the more she realized how little of it was ever about her. She was just a link in a long, twisted chain, a story that started long before she was born and might not end for a very long time. But now she was ready. Whatever came next, whether it was redemption, revenge, or something entirely unexpected, she would face it head-on. Because she knew the game. She knew the rules. And more importantly, she had stopped being a pawn. Behind her, the bus pulled up, hissing and clinking. She hesitated for only a moment before stepping aboard. As the doors closed behind her, the city lights flickered through the rain-soaked windows, and Emma disappeared into the night. One chapter ending, another beginning, and the real story, perhaps, just waiting to be told.